Hello, I am Aisha.
And Paula, your cultural hybrid mental health therapist.
Here to explore unfiltered and heartfelt conversations on core issues
that affect us as human beings. Get ready for honest, captivating,
and real stories that take you on a journey to navigate your life
in the best possible way.
So grab a seat
and stay with us on this episode of
Do We Have Your Attention? Welcome to another episode of the Do We Have Your Attention podcast. We are your hosts, Aisha Popoola and
Paula.B.Martins. I don't know why I put the dot there.
Just for explanation.
You know how you said, so Aisha just said off recording that my intrusive thoughts are taking over. I think you're right.
They're really taking over today. But I love it. I love the explanation. There's nothing wrong with it. Okay, so today we're diving into a topic that we could all relate to, a topic that we can all connect with. Paula, do you want to tell us the name of this topic?
Okay, it's Closure Overrated.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
closure
it is. End of podcast episode.
Okay, there you have it. Episode done. See you guys next week.
Okay, our topic for today is closure overrated. We're going to be really, really diving into the question. It's not just a yes or a no, but
yes,
we will find out soon.
Right. We're going to be exploring if it's really overrated or if it's not. But of course, before that, we're going to start with our mood check-in. Paula, how are you feeling right now? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling light because this is also a light conversation. I feel as though I'm present and happy and positive. So I would say yellow.
Okay.
And then a little bit of still curiosity around a topic and wanting to learn also because as vague as it sounds, it probably is deeper. Yeah. So maybe a little bit of purple as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
How are you feeling?
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I feel like I'm yellow as well, like positive energy. It's very gloomy here today, but I'm kind of bringing the sunlight from within.
Oh, yeah.
But as always, I'm always curious to hear your perspective, your experiences, and open to learn more as we have this discussion. So yeah, let's dive into it. Thanks for the dramatics. Okay. Paula, can you please describe what closure means in the context of relationships? When I say like relationships, also thinking about like loss or trauma. And why do a lot of people think that it's necessary for healing or essential for healing?
Yeah. So I think if I were to use one word to describe closure or define closure, I would say understanding. And to some degree, I think sometimes we look at closure as something that gives us answers. Yeah. And sort of gives us evidence, results, whatever the case might be. But I see it more as understanding or coming to some sense of resolution about whatever it is, like whether it's a relationship, whether it's loss, like you said, or an experience. Yeah. And to some degree, closure for some people can also be meaning making. But it's really being able to make meaning, have understanding of experiences that may have happened to you, especially. And I noticed because if you think about it, closure is typically something that we desire when things don't go the way we want it to go, or things don't go the way we expected it to go, or things went in a direction where we were not necessarily anticipating or expecting. So to a large degree, we don't fully seek meaning and understanding when it goes the way we expected and the way in which we would have hoped for it to go. But when it's in the opposite, where it feels out of our control, we tend to want some sense of resolution.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
How would you describe closure?
I think I would describe it very similarly, just like that answer that you want to, like something that you feel like needs to be resolved. So I like that you use the word resolution because it does feel like a sense of emotional resolution and you saying like understanding that you feel like you need in order to like move forward or without being stuck in whatever cycle you may feel like you're in after a situation had happened. And I think that sometimes closure also gives a sense of like finality. Like once I have this answer, like this is it for me. All my questions or the curious things that I've had in my mind, like this closure helps me kind of close this chapter and feel some level of control. Like you said, so I like that you brought up, you feel like you're out of control. So now you want that control back and you want to feel grounded after a life-altering event or just like a situation, period.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know you also asked as well why people feel it's necessary for healing. Honestly, I would say I have the general answer. I would say I have the general response to that, and then I have like the clinical response. My general response to that is I have no idea.
Fair enough. Fair.
I would say for my general understanding of why people seek it for healing, I actually don't know why we're so obsessed with closure as human beings.
Yeah.
But then I think obviously from a clinical perspective, of just a philosophical perspective, I think that to some degree as human beings, we crave relief or release, or we want to not feel the way we're feeling.
Yes.
And sometimes we see closure as this thing that's going to help us understand and inform us with the goal of basically creating some level of relief or resolution.
Yeah.
Or in some cases, for some people, it's a better understanding, which is more of clarity. So if we're saying that by having this thing, I can feel less bad or less hurt or less, if I know that the reason why they wanted to end that relationship is because of A, X, Y, blah, 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 blah. By the way, this is me also calling like my past self out. Today, I don't see closure.
Good.
Today, I cannot even be bothered.
To be
fair. I would write chapters and chapters and like,
paragraphs.
Tell me why. Tell me why. So I think to some degree, this is me thinking about my own personal experience of why it was something that I craved so much. Is it helps me feel better about the situation. It gives me relief. It gives me understanding. It also helps me feel less, I guess sometimes in some cases it's less responsible. Like if I know that this was out of my control, then I don't have to be fully accountable and responsible for certain things that may have led to. And I know obviously some cases it's not just relationships. We're speaking about relationships at the moment, but it makes
loss.
us
Anything,
loss, some type of loss, or even a job loss, or whatever the case may be. It absorbs you of your own role that you may have played. Well, what do you think?
I like that you really brought that perspective up, because as you were speaking, I was thinking the theme of that illusion of control that it gives us. Like now I could regain this control back, because not having closure in quotes can feel very uncomfortable. And I think a lot of times we're all running away from feeling uncomfortable. So I feel like if I get this answer, or if I reach out to this person, if I write this paragraph, then, you know, I've done my part and I feel more in control. I've let it all go. But the reality is that's still an illusion, because half the times you still don't feel better.
True.
A lot of the times you don't feel better. I think you convince yourself that you do feel better and that you've closed that chapter. There's still going to be lingering feelings that still need to be resolved and processed. So I think I would say from my own experience in the past is giving me an illusion of like, I now control this situation, or I now, like, I always could have controlled the situation. So that closure in itself did not need to give me that. But I think when you're hurting or when you're going through like a painful event, sometimes you just need that, because your brain is just struggling and going through a lot of things that are unanswered questions. And sometimes you just need that to be like, well, yes, now I take my life back. Now I can stand and I can move on from the situation. But sometimes you don't really, I mean, again, from my own experience.
You make an excellent point, and sorry to interject.
It's fine.
Because it brings me to my own question based off of what you just said. Can pursuing closure sometimes hinder our personal growth, or delay emotional pain?
Absolutely. I absolutely think that. Because when I think about moments where I've thought that pursuing that closure was what I needed, I think I became fixated on achieving that closure. So I'm placing my healing or my ability to move forward from this situation on external factors like people or waiting for an apology or like an explanation. And sometimes you may never get that.
Yeah.
Sometimes you may never get that.
Repeat
and I
for the people in the back.
Sometimes you may never get that. You may never get that closure.
Yeah, even being nice most times.
A lot of times, let me even be honest, a lot of times you wouldn't get that. And I think that the dependence on that closure kind of delays your growth. And then you become trapped in that resentment and that helplessness and that anger because you're waiting for an external person to validate how you're feeling. And that means basically that you're giving someone power and control over how you're feeling or how you've decided to kind of heal from a situation. What do you think?
No, what you said is so true.
Yeah.
Especially like when external factors are playing a role in what closure means for you. Like you said, it's giving power and control to situations that you cannot control. But sorry, I'm just, when you're also thinking about times when you've also done that.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, girl.
I can't believe that. Yeah. What were you thinking?
But it can really put you in this position where you're waiting and and feeling as though you start even romanticizing or idealizing that closure in the sense where if I just had that, like if I just had this thing, it's going to really give me what I need. And a lot of times, a lot of those answers are within because growth 100% typically happens.
Pause. Repeat that.
A lot of those answers are within.
Yep. It's from within.
But we're expecting it to be something that people give to us. And to some degree, it also becomes unrealistic if you think about it because it puts you in a position where you can honestly be stuck.
You become stuck,
It's unfortunate because a lot of us are stuck because we're still waiting. And closure doesn't also have to come from people. It can even come from circumstances. It can come from changes that happen. You're waiting for change to happen and whatever the case might be. And unfortunately, it puts us in a position where we're in this vicious cycle of stagnancy because we don't recognize that a lot of what we're seeking from the outside is what we're going to have to really like mirror back to ourselves and figure out from the inside.
Yes.
So when you think about it, absolutely, it actually does hinder personal growth but also delays emotional pain too as well.
Yes, and emotional relief because all of that time that you're using to fixate on getting that closure, you're delaying yourself from the relief that you could get just by being uncomfortable. And we know we don't like being uncomfortable. I definitely know what it feels like, so I know how hard it is. And I think the initial stage is always the hardest because again, your brain is feeling some level of discomfort. It's trying to find control. So it immediately goes in that direction. But you kind of have to go through that discomforting stage to be able to free yourself and relieve yourself from all of that.
And you know the crazy thing about that is that when you actually think about it, delayed pain is still pain that exists.
Absolutely.
Prolonged pain is still pain that exists.
Yeah.
And regardless of the timeline, you're still going to have to face it.
Absolutely.
So when you really think about it, it's not a situation where because you're delaying or it's prolonged, then you don't have to deal with it and you never have to deal with it. You're still going to have to deal with it. So obviously some people will say deal with it head on. Some people will say wait a little. But it just really shows us how a lot of closure that we seek outside is actually closure that still becomes our responsibility.
Yes, 100%. You still have to deal with it. I think every emotion that we avoid, we still have to deal with it. And I think it's easier for us to focus on emotions that we're comfortable with, which is something to even reflect on. Like, why do we gravitate towards that? That's a topic for another conversation. But when we talk about like the uncomfortable emotions, we all know and we've all been there. What you delay still needs to be felt. So it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be next year. It could just randomly come to you 5 years later. But again, like Paula is saying, it would still need to be felt.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what do you think about like situations where closure is impossible? So for example, where there's no contact or sudden loss, how do you think people can find resolution or peace from within? Because we talked about resolution coming from within and not necessarily needing it from external factors. But what if it's like sudden and it's kind of like those situations? I guess a quick example I'm thinking about is like when people just randomly pass and die, and you're like, that is something that people will really struggle with in terms of moving forward. Yeah, I know.
Sorry,
Deep
I just
question.
had a moment where it's a deep one and I'm going to get vulnerable. Oh, Lord.
Thank you for sharing in advance, Paula. We appreciate your vulnerability.
Because I don't want to speak on anybody else's loss. I can only speak on like mine.
Yes.
And just from my own experience of how I've been able to deal with closure.
Yeah.
I would say first and foremost, I find closure with God. And closure comes from my own faith in God and my trust that anything that happens to me, it's in turn going to always be for my good. Even if it doesn't look that way, even if it doesn't feel that way, even if there's no evidence to prove that. That's very difficult. Because I was thinking about my car accident that I was in. And I think that was one of the biggest things I wanted closure on, in the sense where I'm like, I wasn't driving. It was not my fault. The day where I decided not to wear a seatbelt, so that's when that also the impact happened. Why am I now stuck with chronic back pain and spine injury and neck pain and whatnot? And a lot of that is out of, I guess, your control, right? And going back to what you were saying, where you said it's sudden, it's not like I can go and reach out to the Uber driver or the person and say, why did you make this happen? Because even the person does not know either. Like the person doesn't know either. And I think for me, I can only share from this experience. I don't know if anybody else can relate. And I feel like people would. For me, closure is not like something that happens and then that is it. Closure is me living my life every day post-accident. It's me sort of learning to adapt to this new normal. And also recognizing to a large degree that there's some, and this is going to be very hard to say, but it's true. Also recognizing that to a large degree, also going through something like that, it changed my worldview in a way in which I know that worldview would not have existed if I didn't go through that. But then it also put me in a position where I started even valuing parts of my body that we take for granted. So even just recognizing that, that I can't sit for so long. I need to move. I need to be able to listen to what my body needs because I don't want the nerve pain to go down my legs and the logistics of a lot of things like this, because a lot of times we take the little things that are really bigger things for granted. Even if it means the love that you have for someone in grief. Even if it means the care that you hold so dearly when it comes to certain experiences that you have with people. And sometimes when we don't have those things anymore, that's when we're needing that closure so heavily. So for me, I honestly had to accept that I would never know why that happened. And maybe it's just not my place to know. And that's the tricky part. And I would be lying to you if I said that my faith does not play a role. My faith plays a role in
100%,
in the sense where it's like, I have learned that there's certain things I cannot just question. I can only pray that it's instilled in me the things I need to have in order to be able to live a life while accommodating this new normal, basically. Whether it's a loss, whether it's no contact, whether it's like my case, an accident. And it really allowed me grieve to some degree. And I would not say like I fully grieved. I think so large it was very fight or flight. Because there were also, I don't think I'm allowed to say, but there were obviously, because it was not my fault too as well, there were other things that went into place with it. So I wasn't really thinking about how it was making me feel. I was just thinking about not being in pain anymore. But I think a little bit of that really helped me change my perception around it. And by accepting, my perception around it became less about this thing that happened to me, but more so this thing that happened to me that I do not understand,
Yeah.
But I understand that there's many other things that could have happened to me. And then also I understand that it gives me a perspective in life that I know I would never have had. Because I know a lot of people now that will talk about injuries from car accidents, and I'm like, welcome to the club. But not in a bad way, but just more so, you know how sometimes you go through something and
Like
then
you
you
can
really
relate.
get...
Yeah.
You really get the people who have gone through it before you, why they were feeling or reacting the way they were feeling.
Yeah.
So
100%.
to a large degree, it really did help me change that perception, but also go easy on myself in just really giving myself the care and the love and the compassion that I needed in recognizing that this is something that I would never be able to seek. And you know what? Maybe the answers are within. Maybe the answers are based off on how I live my everyday life. But if I keep living, then I create the possibility of being able to actually figure that out.
Wow. That was very powerful, Paula. Thank you for sharing. I think it's a very hard position to be in what you just shared and kind of reframe the narrative of something very traumatic that happened to you, something that you still have to kind of live daily with, the consequences of somebody's actions, and kind of reframing it in terms of rather than focusing on the unanswered questions or what you've lost, because there was a lot of loss in what you shared. And kind of shifting that focus to what you learned and how that experience has shaped your worldview and how you can start focusing on other things that you've probably taken for granted or you didn't even know you were taking for granted. And I think that's a very brave thing to do. I don't think a lot of us have that strength. So I'm glad that you said a lot of the strength comes from God.
I'm not doing nothing.
I'm glad that you said that because it's truly putting yourself in a position where you've kind of accepted, like, this is the reality of where things are. And sometimes acceptance can feel very powerless. And I guess gaining that power back by shifting the focus and changing that narrative of like, I'm not going to feel sorry for myself. I'm not going to like focus on things that I can't change. Because again, part of the trick that your brain does is it kind of gives you that illusion of like, whether if you think about it multiple times, you feel like you would have changed, like situations would have changed or you would have gotten some level of control out of it. But the reality is the outcome will still not change. Like the thing has happened. The reality is here now. And I think sitting in acceptance is one of the hardest things to ever do. But not only sitting in acceptance, but also reframing that narrative. That is so powerful. I'm so very, very grateful for you for sharing that, because I'm sure there are a lot of listeners that probably have been put in similar situations where it's just hard, you know, like this thing happened to me and it's kind of like that existential, like, why?
And
like,
I
why
appreciate
did this
you
happen?
saying that. And as you're even bringing up the listeners, because I also just want to make it clear, because sometimes people can be listening to this and then going, why am I not able to do that? Why am I not? We all can relate. Even if it may not be for closure, there's things where I see people doing and I'm like, why am I not able to do that? Like, why does it have to be this difficult? And I think that that's where that self-compassion, in addition to self-compassion, but it's meeting yourself where you're at. And in terms of where you're at, in terms of capacity, in terms of emotional, mental state. Because it's easy for me to talk about it in this way because I am sort of entering or have entered the other side. I was in the initial phase as well of going through the journey of having to understand what acceptance meant, but also trying to really be able to reframe, like you said, reframe the narrative. But a lot of these things can't be done if you're not meeting yourself where you're at. There's seasons where you're just not capable.
Absolutely.
And that is okay. Being able to accept that this is a season where I'm not capable and being compassionate to yourself is actually you setting yourself up to be able to actually move along. And as I was listening to you, actually just in my head, I was like, acceptance moves you along in life. Closure keeps you stuck in life.
Stagnant.
And I think if you're someone, obviously, and I think at the core, I also know I'm personally someone who always wants to feel like I'm moving along in life. I don't want to ever feel like I'm being stuck. mentally, emotionally, physically.
Yeah.
So I think to some degree, if you're someone who desires strongly to keep moving along in life, by accepting where you're at, you are easily setting yourself for the season in your life where you're actually going to be like, you know what?
I'm confident
I let it
can
go.
Do this now.
Like I let it go. I've accepted. I understand. I may never really know, but it's okay. It's not going to change my trajectory. It's not going to influence how I feel about myself. So I just really wanted to mention that because it's very easy for people to internalize it or personalize it and see it as something that they're not doing. It
wrong.
Takes time.
Right. It really does take time. And I think with the other part of the question is like, how can people find peace on resolution on their own? And I know that you brought up meeting themselves where they're at, which I think is 100% important. But I think that we should also talk about like, if you can't do it on your own at that time, please don't forget to use your support system. And I know that when you're going through a lot of pain, when you're going through a very, very life-altering situation, seeking support can be very hard. But I just want to kind of emphasize that connecting with your community, and whether that's your friends, your family, but also your therapy, if you have the privilege to go to therapy, can be very helpful because some things we can't, like Paula was saying, like we're not ready yet to fully handle on our own or fully process on our own. And sometimes the love that other people give you is so strong enough that you start to kind of internalize that as like, okay, now I'm ready. Now I'm ready to like move to this phase where I can process it and move into the acceptance phase. But again, it's all about taking time and being honest with yourself, having honest conversation with yourself, like where I'm at. And I think sometimes when we say support, people think it has to be like a whole 3 to 5, 10 friend group. It doesn't have to be that. Honestly, it could be one trusted person. It could be 2 trusted people. Like it doesn't have to be like a whole big deal because again, only you knows where you're at and only you knows what you need at that time. So you're going to have to be very honest with yourself. It's really hard, I think.
Absolutely. And as I'm even listening to you in regards to support, I'm also realizing that support can be very much and should be in the reality. It should be tangible in the sense where you have people in your life. But I also recognize that support for me has been like my endometriosis community Facebook groups. It has been through Instagram. It's been through a group of women. There's women of God that I listen to that have like a conversation in the couch, setting better together. And you would hear so many things and you think like, whoa, is this my story? And you're like, no, it's their story. But by even just listening to them, the way in which people might also be listening to us, and we hope that obviously our podcast too acts as a support to people, it can give you support and resources as well, which is very, very necessary. And I'm just thinking about people that say, but I don't have anybody. I don't have anybody. Don't just look at the tangible. The tangible is important. Even other forms of support like this as well is very necessary.
I 100% agree. So we've talked about like closure coming from within rather than through external factors or events. What do you think are some practices that can help people cultivate this inner resolution?
Well, I'm pretty sure I've probably said this before because I'm such a big fan of this notion of knowing yourself, and that if you can really understand who you are, how you think, what triggers you, what your stressors are, how you process information, but then also the things that impact you that you're most hypersensitive to versus the things that you're not, but also really getting to know yourself the way in which you would get to know a friend or a potential partner intimately. I'm such a big believer that honestly, that really sets you up in a position where you can already create habits subconsciously that really actually help you find that peace and find that resolution within yourself. And I think we are a generation, a world of instant gratification and sort of wanting to, I want peace now, I want resolution now type of generation. And I hate to say, but sometimes the evidence or what you're looking for is in the waiting period. Is in the period where you're struggling, is in the period where you don't really know what you're trying to figure out what peace even means. The unknown, exactly.
Yeah.
It's in the unknown. But I guess that also highlights why things like therapy obviously helps.
Yep. 100%.
Why things like talking to your friends helps. Outlets like journaling, even listening to music, finding ways in which you can express yourself and what it is that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would say, and I would love to hear your own thoughts on this as well, is there's one of my favorite Bible passages, and I don't even think about it as a Bible passage. I just think about it as something that's like general knowledge for anybody. Way of life is this too shall pass, meaning everything is temporary.
100%.
Even life is temporary. So like when you actually
have to remind us.
like when you actually, well, if you think about, and I guess this is something this comes from something that helps me as well, where I think sometimes when I just deep it and I'm like, why? So I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to wait for that person to give me, or this situation to give. So I think sometimes when you realize that even feelings are temporary, emotions are temporary, they come and go, they don't actually settle in. And even when they feel like they're settling in for a period of time, they eventually go. Even if they come back, they go. So to a large degree, being able to recognize that a lot of what you're experiencing is temporary, still giving to yourself what is needed in that temporary season, but not looking at the temporary feeling of unknown, like you said, as from a lens of like permanent perspective, basically.
Yeah, like this too shall pass. Yeah. I like what you shared. And just to add on, I think a lot of times we limit ourselves from self-compassion. And I think that it's important for us to treat ourselves with kindness as we heal, and also recognizing that, like what Paula was saying during that waiting phase, that it's really okay to not have all the answers. I think as human beings, we are drawn to wanting answers all the time, and when we want it, how we imagined it. I don't know if you've seen this meme where people are like, this is just an example, people are like, my plan, God's plan, you know? It's like,
I know it.
It's very different from, it's like when you're going through it, you're like, but this is how I imagined, this is how I want it to be. But then when you come out of it and it's like way bigger, way, more successful, more sunny, more, the goal was even way achieved than you expected, then we're like, wow. And it's kind of like putting yourself in the place of like, it's really okay to not know all the answers, because what might be on the other end may be bigger and maybe more fulfilling for you. Yes, it feels uncomfortable right now, but if you could give yourself that space to hold being okay with not knowing, it's very uncomfortable. I know, because
it's very uncomfortable.
I struggle with it as well, but I think the thing that can help us is like just being patient with ourselves, like just being more kind and being patient, and recognizing that not having all the answers doesn't necessarily mean an answer will not come. It just may not look like what we've imagined. And I think forgiving ourselves sometimes plays a huge role. And we have an episode on forgiveness, so please go listen to that episode.
Shout out.
But I think letting go of blame, I think a lot of times we fixate on that blame, whether it's blaming yourself, whether it's blaming that other person. That gives us some level of, I have something to hold on to. I have something to still use as I'm going through this phase of resentment and anger and all these feelings that come with having unanswered questions. But I think forgiving and letting go can be very liberating, because it also puts you in that position where you're like, you know what? This was out of my control. Of course, taking accountability and acknowledging the role you played is very important. But if you're fixating on blaming, I'm just going to blame that person, and because of that, like, all of that is going to limit your growth in terms of that you're going to be holding on to that blame, and that is not going to let you fully process internally and kind of acknowledge what you need from this situation to fully heal. So forgiveness, I think, is a really, really big part.
A very big one.
Yeah, and even if you're the one that did something that caused the situation to not go in the way you wanted it, like, it's okay to recognize that you're a human and humans make mistakes. And whether the other party or other parties are kind of holding it over your head in a way that's making you kind of feel more guilt and blame yourself even more, I think forgiving yourself and recognizing like that's their way of dealing with it, you can't control that. And focusing on like, well, well, I'm human. I made a mistake. This is what I can learn from it. How can I prevent this from happening again moving forward, and just letting go, because you can't keep punishing yourself for a mistake or for being human.
Yeah. Let it go.
Let it go. Let it go. Look at us, vocals. Yes, let it go.
I would like for us to
blame.
touch on this very briefly as we're sort of moving slowly to the end of our conversation.
Yeah.
Do you think that culture or societal expectation plays a role in how we might perceive closure, and I guess also perceive closure differently?
Yeah, I definitely think that closure in many ways is culturally shaped. I think that especially in the Western culture, I think we often emphasize individualism and personal control.
Yeah,
so
very true.
If we think about it from that direction, that means we're placing more importance on like achieving closure through that final conversation or that final communication, or like, let's have this last conversation, or sending this last email, or just seeking justice. So I'm
just thinking about the number of times I've had, let's have this last conversation moment.
But again, the message is that you get control by doing that. But in reality, you don't really 100% gain control by doing that. I think
you often feel worse.
It's illusion, right? It's the illusion. And yeah, I don't know. It's that illusion of control. That last conversation can even bring more chaos for you. Like, I remember talking to my client recently that's going through a breakup, and she's in the waiting phase of just, when you're uncomfortable, you want to move forward, but you're like, but I still have all these unanswered questions. She was like, oh, I really want to ask him something. So I asked her, like, what's the intention behind this question that you want to ask? Like, what are you really looking forward to gaining from this? And she was basically like, it will make her feel better and make her realize that she didn't do anything wrong and it was solely him. And I had to remind her, I was like, but we already knew you didn't really do it. Like, we've been able to hold you accountable. And we've been able to kind of identify the role you played. So doing this that's not really why you're doing this. There's another reason why you're doing it. Oh yeah, tell me why. And guess what? We basically found out that she was doing it because she wanted to see if he's fully healed or if he's kind of still going through pain or still struggling with the loss of the relationship. And I was like, you know what? Let's talk about that. Let's process that. Let's help you deal with what's making you focus more on his healing, because that's what you're doing now. You're uncomfortable with dealing with your own internal emotions that now you feel like you have to place fixation on how he's dealing with this. That's a deflection of feelings. Okay, let's talk about that. And,
Preach.
And I think that really helped her realize, like, dang, it's been really uncomfortable, this breakup. Mind you, it's just been 2 weeks. So, and I told her, I was like, it's just been 2 weeks since the breakup. You've not even reached the tip of the processing, and you're trying to kind of move on from it so fast. So I think that helped her kind of give herself some grace to and realize, like, yes, dang, I need to give myself time, and I need to be okay with being uncomfortable with this breakup.
No, but shout out to this client though for their honesty. And honesty around their feelings about this, because a lot of people don't even allow themselves really get to the root of what the issue is and why this strong need for closure. And obviously, shout out to you as well for being a great therapist and helping your client get there as well, and holding them accountable because it's needed. Because if you think about it, a lot of people, the closure is because of what they want to see. Like, they want to know that. And speaking more relational, they want to know that you're feeling
the
what
pain
they're
feeling.
They typically want to also see how far you are in your own healing journey, because there's this notion of the other person's trajectory influences yours. But just like forgiveness, closure is what you give to yourself. It's not what is given to you by other people. Because at the end of the day, nobody owes you anything.
100%.
Unfortunately, that's one of the hardest realities in life, in recognizing that even because you've had time spent with someone and beautiful experiences and memories, or horrible ones as well, mixed whatever the case might be, nobody really owes you what you need, what you owe yourself, basically. Like, you owe yourself the honesty of really being someone who can work through and is capable of working through a lot of all these unresolved feelings and emotions. So you can move along in life and not necessarily be stuck, but so you can make better decisions that are better for your mental health and your well-being.
Right.
So shout out to this client, honestly, for even they having the capacity to be honest with themselves and giving you the space to challenge them enough, because I think sometimes as human beings, we don't want to be challenged because it means, crap, then now I have to do the work and I have to be the one and I can't find this quick way of having to deal with this and heal faster. So it's a testament to as well to obviously the work that you do, and also a testament to the capacity this client, or the capability this client has, rather.
Yeah, 100%. What a wonderful conversation. So I guess, what's the answer to our question? Is closure overrated?
If you've been listening and you still don't know the answer, then I'm sorry, I don't know what we can do for you. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Maybe listen to the next episode, because I don't know where we're going with this.
Okay, at this point, basically, you should know the answer. But also, in knowing the answer means being patient with yourself, being kind, being compassionate with yourself, and giving yourself time. There's no rush. Healing takes time, and you can't rush processing. It has to be processed with patience and a lot of
time.
Yes, and time, sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
Patience
and time.
Yes.
No, it's true though. And honestly, closure is not bad, in the sense where closure is not what we think it is. Typically, it's not what we're even expecting, not what we're thinking. And if you notice, a lot of times when we let go, like you had mentioned earlier, that's when we actually get the answers that not the answers we wanted, that we were hoping for, but the answers that are needed for you to be able to move forward. Not the answers from anybody.
No.
But the answers just in general, whatever that means. But you get the point.
Overall answer, yes. What you really need. Not what you think you need. Two different things. Okay, so as we wrap up, what's, I guess, one final thing? If people have been listening, if they've been listening and didn't get the gist of it, what's one thing you would at least want them to get the gist of? Like, what's one thing you want them to take away from?
Closure is what I give myself. It's not what others give to me.
Ooh, powerful. How do I follow that? Should I follow it? Okay, let me just say, I think when you think about closure, that journey is very personal. And like we've been talking about, it's less about finding a perfect resolution, but it's more about learning to coexist with that uncomfortable space that it might put us in, and learning more about yourself and growing with that.
I like that. Closure is personal.
Yeah, it's personal. Yeah, so don't compare your closure with someone else. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And on that note,
thank you for listening. Yes, so we are done. So,
all right.
Where can people find the podcast online?
You can find us at DWHYA podcast on Instagram, on Twitter /X, and then you can find us at DWHYA podcast 1 on TikTok. And then if you want to email us, you can find us at info@dwhyapodcast.com.
Yeah. And where can they find you personally, Miss Paula?
You can find me on TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn at Paula.b.Martins.
Yes. So they got that from the beginning. And you can find me at Paula.b.Martins. And you can find me at ab.Popoola on Instagram and Aisha Popoola on LinkedIn. So connect with us. We want to hear your thoughts, feelings, and feedback. And as always, thank you for listening. And
thank you.
We'll see you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.